Hello everybody! I honestly don't know how to start this video. I feel very rusty due to technical and hardware and software difficulties and my own lack of motivation to do pretty much anything in public or on camera. I haven't made a lot of videos in the past couple of weeks. We're gonna move on past how much of a hot mess I've been and we're gonna get into the books. Because I did complete like 90% of the books for my A to Z challenge in November, and I need to talk about the rest of those today. So I ended up reading 24 out of the 26 letters for my challenge last month, which is pretty good, especially considering the last 5 or so days of the month I didn't feel like reading pretty much anything at all, and I'm surprised I finished so many things. It was very strange. So, in alphabetical order, here are the things that I read. Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley. This is one I forgot to talk about in a previous wrap-up. I don't know why. I had it written down on a post-it note and I still didn't talk about it. This is a biography of Jane Austen, kind of seen through the lens of the various homes that Austen lived in, which is very important given that she was an unmarried woman without her own significant income during the Georgian era, so she was very dependent on her family and their whims about where they would live and such. This was interesting. I always enjoy learning more about Jane Austen, and this was a decent biography. However, the entire time I was listening to it, I couldn't shake the feeling like it was biased in some way, probably because Worsley opens the book with her own introduction where she basically says when people go looking for their version of Austen, they find her and that she's no different. So I was like, is Worsley only including those events and interpretations of Austen's life that she thinks supports her vision of what Jane Austen was like as a person? Or is she being more objective, including everything that she found? I don't really have an answer on that one, but this was a relatively decent biography and I'm not sad that I spent the time reading it. It did really make me want to reread a few of Austen's novels, though, which I haven't done in some time. Then there is Kindred by Octavia Butler. This is hands down one of the most difficult books I have read this entire year. It was certainly the most difficult read of November, and this is the one Butler book that I have been putting off for years, and of course it's her most well-known, perhaps most loved novel with significant mainstream and literary appeal. So you probably know what Kindred is about. I believe it was pretty explicitly modeled on slave narratives, and it is about a black woman named Dana in America in the 1970s who is called backwards in time to repeatedly save her ancestor, a white man on a slave plantation in Maryland. And so a lot of the book is the time that she spends basically as a slave on a plantation and how difficult that is going from the modern era with freedom and rights to this era where anybody could do anything to you that they wanted to, and it was such a difficult book to read. I felt like reading this book was more an act of witnessing rather than enjoying. That it was important to read this story and to think about what it was saying and the horrible atrocities and tragedies that Black people went through during slavery. And the thing that probably got under my skin the most in this book is, most of the characters are Black, and the few white characters in the book just don't get it. They're either, slaveholders in the past, like Rufus, who is Dana's ancestor, who just see Black people as property and seem enlightened in one second and then do horrible things in the next second, or they're white people like Dana's husband, who is a white man and who also goes back in time with her, which is something I didn't know about the book, who is a good person but also repeatedly doesn't get it even though he sees it. Even he says and does some things which just reveals how little he truly understands about slavery and how Black people are treated and about racism and what it means to be a Black person, like moving through the world. And so I came away from the book feeling just shaken and disgusted at people and really, really sad about the past. I would recommend this book, absolutely, but I would also caution and say read it when you know that you can take it, basically. For the letter N, I read Never Stop, Finnish science fiction and fantasy stories. The stories in this are selected by Emmy Itaranta, but the editors are 3 other people, and I apologize in advance for butchering some names. I tried to practice. Sara Henriksen, Ani Nupanen, and Emme Torskuluoto. This was a pretty good collection. My only major criticism of it is that there's very little science fiction. Almost all of this is fantasy. The first 3 stories are the only ones that are explicitly science fiction. And the very first one, which is the title story, Never Stop, is the one that I enjoyed the most and that has stuck with me, actually. And it was a pretty satisfying, like 30-page story on its own, a little bit cyberpunk dystopia feeling, which is why I was a bit surprised that I liked it so much. But I liked the story, and I actually thought that it would have made a really impressive opening chapter in a novel. Like, I would read more about this world and about the character Biddy and his further adventures and everything. So I'm glad that I finally read this anthology, but it didn't completely wow me. One really good thing about this that I will say is that it collects like translated stories from a bunch of Finnish authors who are not known very well in the English-speaking world. So I think every single author in this was new to me, and I am relatively familiar with more of the big names in the Finnish SFF world, so this was pleasant to experience some new voices. For the letters S and W, I read 2 miniseries comics by John Allison. I enjoyed both of them, and I'm going to talk about them together because I think they have similar high points and low points for me. So one is Steeple, and the other is Wicked Things. Steeple is set in some seaside town in the UK where the local priest regularly beats demons back into the sea, and then a new priest or vicar in training shows up, and she has a different perspective on what's been going on and also makes friends with the priestess in training from the local Satanist cult. I enjoyed the characters a lot. I enjoyed the scenario a lot. Then there is Wicked Things, which follows Charlotte, or Lottie, who is a side character who showed up as a child in Giant Days. So this is technically, I guess, in the Giant Days universe that I was very excited about. Lottie is a teen detective, and in this story, she kind of gets framed for murder and then is sort of on parole and helping out the local detectives, only they don't really let her help. It's a caper, very enjoyable. I like the characters. And then both of these, Steeple and Wicked Things, don't really have proper endings. They seem like they're one-shots, like they're not gonna be volume 2 continuing the adventures. So Wicked Things ends without the central mystery actually being solved, which is kind of weird. And then Steeple is very episodic, and the way that it ends, I was very surprised, and I felt like there were some loose ends as well. So I think what I've discovered with John Allison is that I really enjoy his character types. If you like the characters in Giant Days, you will really enjoy the characters in these 2 comics. I also really like just the weird zany plots and the humor. I love the way that he writes people and these scenarios. But unlike Giant Days, these 2 just didn't have proper endings, and that was weird. I know that Steeple is being continued on the author's website, and I will definitely be reading more of it there. Wicked Things, I don't know what's going on with that one. Maybe the character will come back in the future. I hope so, at least. The next letter is T, and for that I read The Two of Them by Joanna Russ. This is a feminist science fiction novella, and I'm pretty sure it's about people working for the same time travel organization as Alex does in Picnic on Paradise, but Alex isn't the main character of this one. A woman named Irene is. Irene is a time travel agent. Her partner is a much older man who is also her lover. And Things about this. I really didn't like the first part, like the first third of the story seemed to be really focused on Irene's past and how she ended up running away from home and taking up with this man who became her partner. And there was this whole bit where she's like 17 and having sex with her boyfriend and getting mad at him because he's super misogynistic. And then she just runs into the arms of this much older man and he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have sex with a teenager. This is cool. And I'm just, oh, creepy vibes. The main story, however, is that in the future, when Irene is all grown up, she and her partner are set on a mission to this asteroid where basically this Muslim society is, and it's pretty much this exaggerated stereotype of what people think a Muslim society is like, with men in charge and women are only allowed in the home, in harems, and they're solely defined by their beauty, their marriages, and their children. And it's just horrible, stagnating life for women. Irene doesn't like it. Irene makes a lot of splashes in this world because she's a woman who dresses like a man and acts like a man, and everybody's like, but where are your children? It's literally a line in the story. She and her partner are staying with a man, and she encounters his 12-year-old daughter, who is beautiful and just, you know, an ordinary 12-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her, but everything is going to be denied to her because she's a woman. And Irene takes the girl. And this is the part of the story that I think I might fundamentally disagree with. All of the synopses, the summaries I've read of this novella from other sources, the introduction to this particular edition, also what I think Gwyneth Jones had to say about it in her book on Joanna Russ, they kind of frame the story as the 12-year-old girl wants to run away from home and chooses to go with Irene. The way I read the story, Irene just decides for this girl that she shouldn't live in this society anymore, and she takes her. She just takes her. And there's no good consent given to this. It really bugged me. The fact is, you just can't walk into somebody's home and say, I don't like the way that you treat your relatives, I'm gonna take your kid away from you. That doesn't help. You shouldn't just, no, don't do that, you know? So I really disagree with that, and the story ultimately is not a happy one. It doesn't have a happy ending. It's very odd. All that being said, my problems with this aside, the gist of the story is kind of I think it's a line in the book about women being driven mad by their own rage. It's a feminist story, and it's very much raging against the stereotypical gender roles that women are forced into and how that messes with women, how that just, it drives them mad, you know? So I thought actually it had something interesting to say in that regard, but the characters, the way that they went about doing things, a lot of the action, the decisions in the story, I just didn't get along with them very well. I think this may be my running theme with my experience with Joanna Russ. She is very ardent in her stories, and they're also old. I mean, these are from like, you know, the 60s, 70s, 80s. I think this book was from 1979. And it's a different era of feminism as well. And I really like Russ as a critic and as a voice of the time. I'm not sure that I totally enjoy all of her fiction though. And the last thing that I read for my A to Z challenge is Why the Last Man, Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughn and Pia Guerra. So this is a comic series I've been meaning to read for a long time. I think it's one of the most popular things that Vaughn has written, and I will be definitely continuing with it. It is about a virus that kills all of the men in the world almost instantaneously except for one man. They don't know why he or his pet monkey, which is also male, have survived, and he's like on this quest now. I think the setup of this is ludicrous. That every single male of any species would be killed instantaneously around the globe by a virus is WTF. However, I enjoyed it. I liked the characters and I could kind of see where the setup was going and everything, and I want to continue with it. So you'll probably be hearing more about this one in the future. I know a lot of people have talked about this because it is pretty popular, but whatever. So yeah, I read that for the letter Y, obviously, and that is it. The only two letters that I didn't get to this month were R and Z. I was gonna read Relentless Moon by Mary Robinette Kowal for letter R. I didn't even start it. I didn't have time. And then for the letter Z, I started reading Zion's Fiction, which is an anthology of Israeli speculative fiction, and I will finish that at some point, but it's really slow going, which is why I didn't force myself to get it read by the end of the month. I could have. I decided to not make myself because that wouldn't have been fun. So all in all, 24 out of 26 titles. I deviated very much from my original TBR, mostly so I could fit in more audiobooks and more comics, and that worked out really well. I enjoyed a lot of what I read, and it was a good month of reading. And now I'm on to December, and I have no plans this month except to read whatever the heck I feel like. We'll see how that goes. So I need to wrap up because I need to go do some other things now, and I'm running out of battery power again. So those are all the things I read in November. Definitely let me know if you have thoughts on any of these. Leave me a comment down below. I'll be back to talk to you again very soon, I hope. And until then, bye.